Thank you so much, Kate and Sierra, Walter, everybody, teens that are here, Jared. My name is Alex Herrera. I lead the teen programs at Hyde Park Arts Center. And just as a little background of what we are, not just YBA, but our entire teen programs, we are a free program that happens after school. It's an extracurricular program for young artists in high school to continue their art practice, but also their college and career readiness with the guidance of professional teaching artists, assistants, visiting artists, staff, and a whole network of other teen programs across the city. We are composed of 6 free programs, and this is just one of them. This is our leadership program that focuses on leading events, public programs, recruiting and engaging with new teens across the city. So we're super excited to have this group here who's been doing a lot of work virtually. We haven't stopped since we've shifted over to doing our programs online, but they can share a little bit more about what they're up to as well. But a lot of their work is also focused on accountability. They're researching a lot about institutions and how they function, particularly this group. So I'm going to just pass it over to Jared, who can speak a little bit more about that curricular side and project side of what this group has worked on. So yeah, thank you, Jared.
Good. Hi, Walter. Thank you so much again for being with us today. It's an honor, and we're really excited to have you. For the past year, I've been working with YBA, and prior to that, I was a Jackman Goldwasser resident for the Hyde Park Arts Center, and that's kind of how I became a teaching artist here with these young artists. And since COVID and the pandemic, everything has forced us to think about public engagement and accessibility in this like virtual lens. And it's helped us to like really start imagining what we want not just the art industry to look like once things start opening back up, but just how we want to like be maneuvering as young Black creative people in a city like Chicago. And we know that you were a major, if not the sole role for getting us that really unique opportunity to ask Jeff Koons questions earlier in 2020. And again, thank you. We gave you a shout out. I don't know if that made it into the actual televised thing that everyone saw. We definitely gave you a shout out. We were just like, really, really thankful for that. And so we have more questions for you. Again, thank you for being here. And I'm going to just open it up for the rest of YBA to introduce themselves, what kind of art they do. And but before that, actually, we like to sort of extend the floor to our guest. And so how would you like to identify today? How would you like us to refer to you? We know you have a lot of different roles, or you wear a lot of different hats. So how should we address you? We want to give you.
Call me Walter.
Okay. I'm going to open it up now to YBA to introduce themselves.
Good.
And let you know some stuff, and we're going to ask you some questions.
Okay. And tell me about yourself, of course, before you ask the question. Okay. So who's starting?
Okay, I can go. Okay. Hi, my name is Alexis.
Alexis.
I go to Kenwood Academy. I'm currently a senior. I would say, I've been a photographer for a while, but I'm really getting into videography. I'm planning on majoring in film in college next fall. This fall coming up, sorry. And the question that I have for you is, if you had the power, well, you do have, but if you could change one thing in higher education, what would you change, and like why? And also, like, how would you implement some of the things that you've learned throughout your career into the institutions that we currently are in?
Well, I think higher education is very expensive, too expensive. for many people, and especially in the arts. I know that's why when I was president of SAIC, we started a number of programs, especially to try to get students from the Chicago area, because it is costly. So if there's one thing, I think I would try to make, and not just art schools, also make them more accessible, make the colleges more accessible. And a number of institutions are doing that, very wealthy institutions, but not everybody gets into a very wealthy institution. I would argue for more public, state support, federal support for institutions of higher education. That would be the primary thing I would change.
Okay, my name is Darius Donald. I also attend Kenwood, and I'm a senior also. I'm a photographer, and
You were a photographer also, Alexis.
yes,
right?
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And
They have a good photography program there?
most definitely at the Hyper Art Center in Kenwood.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
with me, my question would be, seeing you have
I
a lot
interrupted you, stop.
seeing you have a lot of connections in the art community, how do you hold on to those connections, and how do you like when you want to ask for a favor or like ask certain questions to certain artists, how do you approach them?
I found artists are pretty open. There's some, there are very few, but there's some well-known ones, like Yami Plemza, who doesn't like to talk about his work. You know, he doesn't like to explain his work. But most artists I found are flattered when you show interest in their work and you ask about it, and like to tell you what they were thinking of when they worked on this and maybe how they did it. Two parts of, the meaning of the work and the technique that goes into it. Some artists are very interested, not everybody's, who likes to talk about their technique. Jeff Koons, I don't know if you asked him about that, but he puts a lot of work into selecting the materials. He has this one source in Germany that makes the stainless steel that he used, the only place in the world that can make it, that has the kind of right reflective properties and smoothness that he can use. And he spends a lot of time on it. It's as if he were making a fine instrument, a car or something, rather than a work of art, the time he puts on materials. So I like art, my wife and I, we always did, but I really didn't become very deep and knowledgeable about the community until I became the president of SAIC. That gave me an entree. And it's just been great. You go to galleries, speak with people, you try to get visits to artist studios. Now some, well, they don't have time to be bothered all the time, sure, that. But if you can figure out a way to do that and get to know them personally. And I've also found, you say you have connections, it's like probably anything, the more people you know, then they know people, right? And they can speak for you when you want to you meet someone else, you can ask an artist to introduce you. So it's just being in the community for me has made a big difference. Yeah, I'm a physicist, so
Thank you.
I wasn't sure when I went to SAIC how I would be accepted or seen as a scientist and physicist.
Walter, you bring up an interesting point though about identifying as a physicist, but I wonder if everyone could benefit to sort of think about whatever field they're in more artistically or creatively, because then maybe more problem solving can happen and we can sort of push against sort of some of the systemic things that keep people from having access or keep people from feeling like they can even step foot within said institution or field, right?
Say a little more about that. I don't think I might be missing something.
I try to talk to like YBA and my student and young people about how important it is to be able to talk about art with people that aren't just artists. and the sort of role that we get to play in kind of making other people, like giving other people to think creatively about the fields that they're in. So like, what does it mean for like a banker, knowing that you just came out with this book? What would it mean for more bankers to think artistically about problem solving, finances, and maybe thinking or like resorting to formulas that they have always been like resorted to, like maybe like new, like creativity is how we kind of can keep problem solving.
I
And
see
like,
what you're saying. I see what you're,
yeah.
yeah. We talked a lot about that at SAIC, and there are a number of institutions who have seen that they need within their organizations the ability to think differently, to see things from different perspectives. That's the way many artists do and many scientists do, to not necessarily see that the traditional ways of doing things or carrying out operations are the right. People use the word think outside of the box. I'm not sure that captures it, but people who have an ability and instinct and the kind of courage, I would say, to view things differently and to try to do things differently. It's one thing to see things and think about doing them differently, but also to actually try, to implement them. And there are organizations, I haven't followed it lately, who are actually hiring artists, residents, to help them think more creatively. I have a very good friend, his name is, was a chairman of the Department of Art at Brown for a number of years, one of my closest friends. He's a sculptor and painter and very, very creative artist. He was had been working with corporations, many in France, maybe they're ahead of US corporations, to work with their senior executives on just this kind of thing, having workshops, having retreats, in which he asked them to do things and to try to see it in different ways, the way an artistic person might. So that's definitely something I think people who have that talent and genius to be creative artistically bring to the world. And if your question is, should there be more, get more credit for that or be more aggressive in doing it? I think so. Artists, I think many people do see artists who are not engaged deeply. People who paint pretty things or paint outlandish things or make outlandish things. And also, someone may ask about it later, I really didn't appreciate as deeply the social cultural aspects of art making and creativity until I went to SAIC. I mean, that art can be very revolutionary. I mean, you're probably finding that at an early age because you're starting out doing art at an early age, which I didn't.
I want to also disclose that I showed YB a like segment of a commencement speech that you gave for MIT in 1991. And part of what you were talking about were the ethics around research and why research is so important and essential in processes. In a lot of ways, artists are researchers. And do you see that, like those parallels a lot in your work or like, yeah, can you maybe talk about research in its role in your practice? Because in a way, it seems like you've got an interdisciplinary practice.
Well, I did. I'm not doing research now. I'm not doing science now. I'm more retired from that, a little more administration and policy. But I think in every endeavor, especially endeavors where what you do affects other people deeply, or affects a large number of people, have to be guided by some ethical principles. I mean, I think that's art, probably any field, fields where the public is more directly engaged probably demand more thought about that than others. I mean, if you're doing something that no one ever sees, you know, I don't know, you're making biscuits or something in the back of a restaurant, or whatever you're doing, it's a noble profession, but people are not looking at you. You're not providing an example. And any endeavor in which you or your work is providing an example to the public in any way that implies that this message you are sending is something that they should reflect on, adhere to. I think the question of the ethical principles you bring to that are very, very important. Now, you know, the situation may be different in determining exactly what you do, but it should be thoughtful. You know, some art is very outlandish. Some is designed to provoke, to anger, to create reactions. And if that's the purpose of it, then that's ethically, to me, okay. If it's a gratuitous insulting or gratuitously demeaning, then to me that's something else.
I want to open it back up to YBA and questions that some members have. Someone we haven't heard from.
Where on earth did you find that MIT speech? Everything's on YouTube, right?
Everything is on YouTube, and it was really awesome to see, just because a lot of things that you were talking about, specifically when people make errors in research, like how do you rectify that? I think we're coming to, you know, we're still having those conversations now. So it was really cool to see.
I go back and listen to it myself now.
Oh, I have the link. I'm sending it right now.
Okay.
So I want to open it up to YBA.
Okay.
Some questions, someone that we haven't heard from.
I'll go. Okay, so hi, Walter.
Hi, Raya. Raya?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's Raya Taylor. I'm a fashion enthusiast. I love higher end luxury fashion. I fashion media in New York next fall, well, this fall. And I guess my question for you would be, being that you're from Mississippi, my family's actually from Mississippi. How did you garner these relationships to get these high rank positions that you had in the past? Like, my biggest fear is not knowing somebody who knows somebody to get where you want to be. So how did you what's the word, not negotiate, but basically just make relationships? Thank you.
Well, that wasn't always the case. You know, when I was young in Mississippi, I didn't know anybody. Over the years, well, nothing beats hard work. And you start with that in any profession, anything you try to pursue. And I went to Morehouse College very young. I went out of the 10th grade. And I learned there the importance of hard work, persistence, sticking to things. And I also learned how to learn things. I could go into that more, and got a confidence that I could learn new things. But also learned about the importance of mentors, because the faculty there were very mentor-oriented, very interested in not you as a person, not just as a number. And some people find it very difficult to approach people to try to gain their mentorship. African-American men, and Morehouse College is all African-American men, are more reluctant probably than others, young Black males, to reach out and say, I'd like help, I would appreciate your help. But I would suggest you think about that, because the way you start making these connections is it's almost one at a time, but then it can sort of not explode, but really can branch out very quickly. You know one person, that person knows you. And that person knows you pretty well because they are mentoring you and they know you. They know you enough to trust you. They know your values. They know who you are in some sense, not just what you do. And that usually, if you're going to have a mentor, that person is at a level higher than you. And then the group they are in is a group that, maybe older, more distinguished, more accomplished. But then they talk about you in that group when you get to be known, and then you meet other people. And the thing just sort of grows. And as you move to other organizations, I would always have, when I changed jobs, a very good example. I was in Washington and I moved to San Francisco, went there to be provost of the University of California system. And before I went to San Francisco, I had one friend, my old graduate school roommate, but otherwise we didn't know many people there. So I had been very involved in Chicago. So I asked my connections in Chicago, would they introduce, would they write letters, would they introduce me to people in San Francisco? The way I became a member, got invited to join the board of Bank of America, which was based in San Francisco, is I had been on the board of a bank here called First National Bank of Chicago, which is now JP Morgan. And I asked the CEO, would he introduce me to people in San Francisco? And he did. He wrote letters. And I got there, they met me and they introduced me to other people. So it's something you have to work at. And I have found that people generally are flattered when you ask them for suggestions or help or mentoring. Some people get annoyed, some don't want to take the time. And that has happened to me. But by and large, overwhelmingly, people feel honored that you would feel that they know something or they could be helpful to you. So I would not be shy about seeking out mentors.
Let's hear from someone that we haven't heard from yet. Who's got a question?
Hi, my name is Bianca. I mostly paint, but I try to work in different mediums. My question is, what is the most important or difficult thing about breaking into a field that you might not be familiar with? And how did you get past that? Like, what did you do to get past that?
I think the most difficult thing is sort of learning the language of the field. I think in any field, it's so interesting. If you don't know the terms or language, in physics, mathematics is the language of physics. So if you don't really understand math well, it's hard to do that. And it feels like when I first learned about getting into art and people would use terms that I wasn't quite sure about quite what it meant. So I spent time with people just learning the language. That's the first thing. Even if you don't really know anything in depth, if you know the language, then you can ask questions in the language. I mean, it's hard to ask, I don't know what's that behind you, right? Is that a tempera? Is it paint? I mean, what's the medium? All of those, you can't even ask intelligent questions, and therefore you can't have a good conversation. The second thing is to go back to the mentor relationship. First, work hard, study, read all you can about the field, but then engage people, ask them questions. When I would first go into a new organization, a new field, or join a new board or something, if I didn't understand something at a meeting or conversation, I would ask one of the person who was talking about it, who was presenting, would they mind if I came by? Had a private meeting with them because I'd written down a lot of questions. I didn't want to take up all the time during the talk or the meeting or whatever. And I would like to go to make sure I understood these things. And again, I've most always found that people were flattered. At first, I said, God, they're going to worry that I'm bothering them. They have a job. They don't have time to spend just tutoring me. People were very flattered most of the time. So those are the three things: learn the language, work hard at do all the reading, and reach out to people in the field.
Hi, I'm Madison. I go to Kenwood. My main. Okay.
Where are you? Madison. Okay, go ahead.
I do photography, culinary, and I'm a writer, so I plan on majoring in journalism next fall. And my question is, how did you make the transition from science to art, and what led you to become a president of an art school?
This is one of those serendipitous things that happen quite often in my life. I had retired from Morehouse College. Then I had retired as chairman of Bank of America, which I write about in this book. And I was here in Chicago, and a friend of mine who I know, a colleague I've known for a while, asked would I be interested in doing something now that I was mostly retired here in Chicago. I wouldn't have to move. And I said, well, what is it? I thought I'd be asking if I'd maybe chair some group or commission or something part-time. I said, well, let's talk about it. And he said, well, do you know about the School of the Art Institute? I said, I do, I've heard of it. I don't know it well. So, well, the president there had just been asked to leave because he didn't really get along with the faculty. And they were not ready, it's only been there 2 years. They had a new provost, and they were not ready to go out and do another search. They wanted to wait. And would I be willing to come down on an interim basis as president? So I'm a physicist. So, well, yeah, that's fine. But you know about art, you've been at schools like Brown, Chicago, where they have art departments, California. And we just need someone to come down who knows how to lead organizations and calm things down. People are very upset. President left, faculty is upset. And I said, well, okay, let me talk to some people there to see how they feel, some of the faculty. And they were very welcoming. So that's how I went down. I thought it would be about a year. And after about 6 months, I got to know a lot of the faculty and the board members there, and they asked me would I stay. I said, really? So yeah, so they sort of liked me, I liked them. And it was a question about how do you learn new fields? Well, I met, almost constantly. I go to every department, sit down for an hour and say, explain to me, what is performance art? What is it? How do you do it? And I'd go to other art therapy. I knew about it, but I didn't really understand art therapy. But I treated it like a student. I treated it as if I was going back to school. And the thing that turned out to be really great is I found that artists were a lot like scientists in many ways, very curious, very creative, very willing to do things differently. And so I didn't feel out of place. I felt I could understand the creative process. I could understand the way they thought, because I'd seen that in very creative scientists. And we began to develop programs in art and science. And now we were one of the best known schools in the country that brings together programs in art and science. But it was really almost serendipitous that I actually got invited to go there. And then I stayed 6 years. I never expected that. I stayed 2 more years as chancellor, so I was there 8 years. I made so many new friends. I got involved in a whole new community of people whom I may have never known. So it was wonderful. Still is. I'm still involved in the community, of course.
Let's hear from someone else that we haven't heard from.
Hi, my name is Zoe. I am a junior at Kenwood, and I'm a painter, and I also dabble in photography and jewelry making. And I'm newer to YBA, but one of the main components of YBA is like leadership, and a lot of us want to go into like positions of leadership, and I was wondering what's your advice for like us young leaders?
That's a very good question. I've thought a lot about it, written, in fact, a lot on leadership. And I find the most effective values. I'll show you a book here, which I think very interesting. This is a book, can you see that? Called How to Lead. Can you read it? Can you read it? No. Is it coming through on the camera?
We can see it. Yeah,
Okay.
it looks like there's like,
Yeah. It's a set of interviews that a guy named David Rubenstein, who's very well known, interviews people who are leaders in every field, from Oprah Winfrey to Bill Gates, just in any field. And I've written about that some in my writings. I think effective leaders are people who can convey to people who are working with them that they have the right values, integrity, honesty, and commitment to whatever they're willing to, they're set out to do, that other people will buy into. And no matter what you're trying to do, it's the people who work with and for you who are going to do it, unless you're an individual artist or scientist doing your own work. Any organization, you have to get the people to do the work. And the only way, not the only way, I think the best way I've found is they have to trust you. The guy, a guy named Bob Galvin, whose family founded Motorola, and I used to be on the board of Motorola, he would say, the job of a leader is to spread hope and build trust. You have to, within the organization, no matter how small, make sure that you are a person that people trust, they trust your judgment, they will follow you, they will work with you because they trust you, and that you are willing to put in the work that's required, and you set an example for them. I have been very fortunate over my life that I find that people really like to work with me. And I didn't understand why for a long time. I thought about it, and I think some of the things I just said is why. People like working for me, and they like working with me. And so it's been a great advantage to me when I'm in organizations that I'm leading. Give everybody else credit. Don't worry about it's coming to you.
That's a really powerful point that you bring up. Yes.
How we doing on time, Jared? I'm the cook in the house, and I have to go cook dinner for my wife.
Yes.
So,
we have like a little bit more time left.
okay.
I want to, again, yeah, we have about like 15 minutes left.
All right.
I wanted to hold space again for the YBA members that haven't asked a question yet.
Good.
There's just a few left.
Yeah. I wanted to know, like, so, like, how was your experience at Morehouse? Because I'm like seriously considering going there. So, like, how would you say going to Morehouse affected the rest of your life? Because a lot of people say it's like a lifetime thing when you go there.
Well, it's changed my life. Everything I owe to going to Morehouse. I mean, that's a simple statement. Now, why is that true? First of all, it's a place where I really learned that I could learn. I never thought I was particularly smart when I went there. I found out I was because I had teachers who worked with me and brought out the best in me. So that's on the intellectual side. And I was imbued with habits that I think I know stood me well, throughout my life. That's it. Hard work, persistence, honesty and integrity, willingness to work with others, giving back to the community. Those are values that are just sort of rubbed into you at Morehouse. And there's a community of people who I've just been lifelong friends, like a big family. And then I went back as president, which was, I think, even better. My wife and I have traveled all over the world, literally. We have never gone anywhere, from in the jungles in Kenya to a mountain in South Africa, an art gallery in Amsterdam, the train in Paris. We almost never go anywhere with somebody, with a Morehouse man. And my wife has this feeling that if I'm ever in trouble anywhere in the world, I'll say, is there a Morehouse man anywhere? So you should go, all right?
I think we've heard from everyone except one person.
Yeah, me. Hi, my name's Nicole, and I'm a media artist. I go to Ogden, and I've done like a lot of work regarding like institutions, especially like art institutions and like inclusivity and stuff like that. So I wanted to ask about like your experience as like especially a person of color, like navigating in an art institution and how that experience is for you and like how inclusivity, I guess, or how you witness that within the art community that you're a part of. I don't know if that question makes sense, but
Yeah, it does, it does. Well, I'm sure, where are you in school?
oh, what grade am I in?
And where? You didn't say which school.
Oh, Ogden.
Oh, maybe you did. I think, unfortunately, that's been an issue in the art world. Probably as much or maybe more than in the science community or maybe in other communities I've found. Navigating through art institutions, especially museums, major galleries and the like, have not been, they maybe have been open, but they've not been as encouraging or welcoming or inclusive. And I think if you're seeing that a lot of changes are happening in some of the major national museums, some even here in Chicago, especially in the curatorial staff, where there have been very few African American or even curators of any color in some of the major institutions. And Black artists have not been as easy to have their shows done, to have their art collected. That's changing a lot. I think you're coming along at just the right time, frankly. That is, I know, growing recognition of the importance of art by African Americans, people looking back historically to sort of rediscover artists that have been long overlooked. And I think it's a good time. I don't mean there are going to be any challenges, and they will be there, but I think if you're going to pick any time to be entering the art world, you will find that doors are probably going to open a lot easier than they have been open over the last several years, the last several decades.
I think about so much, Walter, how we have had the internet to assemble communities to support us through microaggressions, oppression that's more institutional or systemic. And you're someone that's had this amazing interdisciplinary career that spans beyond the sort of time of the internet that we've grown accustomed to, and as the internet kind of matures and develops. And so I'm wondering if you can sort of lastly speak to maybe some survival techniques that you think of as like timeless techniques, so that maybe if we lose the internet, we can still figure out how we can survive as we keep trying to break down barriers and promote inclusivity and equity and restitution for all the wrongdoings that have happened. What are some of the things that have kept you afloat when you maybe were the only person of color in the room or the only Black man in a space?
It's a good question. And there are various, I don't think there are any tried and true techniques, but I think there are things you really have to have if you're going to get through those situations in life. You have to have confidence in yourself. And I was saying earlier, that developed in me a lot at Morehouse. And I don't mean an arrogance, but if you don't, you have to believe, yes, I can do this. I am fine. I'm just as good as that person. And you have to work on believing that. It's easy to say that. That's one. Second, you need friends, the community, and the family. If you don't have the family. Growing up, I had my family, and then friends and colleagues, people with whom you can talk when you need to, when you're in a situation where you feel you are having difficulty navigating it. And the third is, I think I didn't realize this until I started looking back. I think you have to be, you don't have to be. I was a little, what's it called, hard-shelled. I just didn't let a lot of things bother me. I've been asked, well, you must have been subjected to a lot of racism here and there and there. And I probably was. And in many cases, I'm sure I was, and I probably didn't even know it. That I didn't know people were doing things, because I tried not to focus on that. I was focused on what I had to get done, what I could do. And I have had on a couple of occasions, someone would say, well, didn't you see how that person looked at you? And I know. And I did not. And did you see that, what they did? And what did they do? Well, they did that. They didn't wait on you right away or something. I said, really? I've got myself to a point where I just refuse to allow other people to affect my mood all the time. I mean, if your mood is, you ever heard of the Brownian effect? Anybody ever take physics? Einstein discovered it. If you look underwater in a fluid, you see things sort of bubbling around. It's called the Brownian effect, because the molecules are hitting other molecules and they move around. And you don't want to be caught in a Brownian effect where everything you do is subject to everybody else's impulses or comments or things. So those are some of the techniques. Now I'm a, what do they call it, internet immigrant. I wasn't born digital. I don't think I'm not even a naturalized digital citizen. I'm still struggling in the social media world, but I have grandchildren, so my tutors.
Walter, thank you so much for being with us today. I don't want to hold you up for dinner. Wait, what is for dinner?
I'm cooking beef back ribs, which I cook and reheat, which takes about 4 or 5 hours, because I did them a few days ago, so I have to go reheat them.
That sounds amazing. Well, again, I want to thank you for being here with us and just sharing space. It's unique that we get to have access to someone like you, and just, I think, hopefully more intergenerational conversations, be it on this platform, or maybe you'll have to come by and visit us when we open back up in physical space again. But we really appreciate you and all the work that you do.
I would love that. But I'd like to change the format next time, maybe in person. I really would like to hear your stories. Okay?
Deal, we can make it happen.
Okay, all right, take care, guys.
Yeah, bring the ribs.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Walter.